So this is part 3, lecture 6 over the government restraints, right? Because if there's no government restraints, legislators are going to consistently run budget deficits due to things like the special interest effect and due to rational ignorance of voters. So let's get into it. One of the things we have to look at when we're talking about choices made by political officials, there's a great quote by James Buchanan. He was I guess he's kind of cited as the founder of the public choice school, where we talk a lot about market failures, right, where things like public goods don't get provided, but there's also such a thing as government failure, where government can fail to do the roles that fail in the roles that have been provided to it, right? So, because they're both made up by people, right? Markets are made up by people, governments are made up by people, and people react to incentives, and sometimes those incentives can lead us down the wrong path, right? If we're not careful and set up a nice framework of rules to prevent us from doing such a thing. Okay, he says the attractiveness of financing spending by debt to the elected politicians should be obvious. Borrowing allows spending to be made that will yield immediate political payoffs without the incurring of any immediate political costs, right? So I'm going to borrow because then I can get stuff now for people, and I'll be able to push off all that cost into the future when, hey, I'm not going to be in office, so maybe you can do whatever you want, right? This is very evident. This is what we call the short-sightedness effect, yeah? So one thing we want to, like some terms we need to have made clear first, because sometimes people can find these confusing. But there's a difference between a deficit and debt, right? A lot of times they both start with D's, or like, same thing, right? No, very important. So the first thing I want to talk about is the deficit. Okay, this is how much each year the government is overspending, right? So if the government is bringing in $100 in taxes but is spending $150, there is a deficit of $50. Right? That is the yearly deficit. Okay, so in order for us, since we're spending $150, we have to borrow the rest, right? We have to borrow that $50. Okay, so that $50 is the deficit. Okay, now when we add up all those deficits as well as surpluses, because there's been some years in American history where we've spent less than what we've brought in taxes, so that's a surplus. So when we add up all those deficits and surpluses, we'll get the total debt, or what we just simply refer to as the U.S. debt. This is the accumulation of all the deficits that we've previously had, okay? So, now that we have that out of the way, let's start talking about debt and how it comes to be here in the States. Why is it that we find ourselves always spending, okay? Well, why do we use debt? Well, the first thing we have to know is that, why do we have debt in the first place? It's because we spend too much, right? So we have to borrow by selling things like bonds, right? So a lot of our debt, we like to think, is held, like it's America's in debt. Who's America in debt to? What other countries? Well, a lot of it is held by us, citizens, right? Because we buy bonds from the government in order to make safe investments, or what we perceive to be safe investments, because we always think the government's going to be able to pay us back, right? If the U.S. government can't pay us back, I have much larger problems, right? Because that would mean if the government's unable to pay someone back, that means that my dollars probably aren't worth that much all of a sudden, and that also means that I don't know, maybe it's the Red Dawn and North Korea is coming down from the sky and they're taking over. I don't know. I'm just being ridiculous. Let's go on. Another reason they borrow is that borrowing, it's less noticeable than taxing, right? Because if you try to use taxes to pay for the deficits, right? We're going to be spending more this year. Let's increase taxes. Taxpayers, they're not going to be a fan of that, right? They wouldn't want to vote for that. So it's a lot easier to borrow than it is to tax, okay? And it also allows them to, if you spend on something, right, that, why I guess we kind of talked about, hey, the politicians, they spend a lot. We didn't really talk about why they spend a lot. It's because it gives them something to say, hey, when I was in office, I did this thing. Look what I did. I brought a sports stadium to our place, right? Yeah, look at me. I spent money, making all these roads better. I spent money providing all of these services and programs. Okay, that's why politicians like spending, because, hey, they're people. They react to incentives, right? And they're going to do whatever's going to get them re-elected, right? So this spending oftentimes will lead to, or will always lead to, I should say, us borrowing to pay for that, yeah? And we call this the short-sightedness effect of politicians. I mentioned this earlier, but see, politicians, they have to focus on, what will keep them in office, right? And that's things that they can do today. So they're going to focus, when they look at the cost of borrowing, But yeah, sure, it's going to cost people in the future, but I'm not going to be in office in the future. So I'm just going to focus on the cost now, which to borrow money, you're literally getting money now. The costs don't come till later. So they don't focus on those, and they focus on the benefits of today. Hey, I borrow and I build this the library, the stadium, the school upgrade that wasn't needed, so on and so forth. And you see how they can focus on the cost and benefits of today, and they don't think about the cost in the future, right? Where when we borrow too much and we can't pay it back, oh no, right? But America hopefully won't be to that point for a while. We'll talk about why. I think a lot of people focus on the debt when there's something else that they should focus on instead. So let's watch this here. This is a great example of politicians talking about budget cuts. I think here, they may focus on a couple of politicians, and I want you guys to know that, regardless who the politician is, it's always going to be the same whenever we talk about, cutting some items in the budget to try to save money. This is a great example of demonstrating just how silly sometimes we can be in thinking that spending is actually being cut.
Recently, President Obama made news by announcing that his team would find $100 million worth of federal spending that they can cut from the budget. Some people are saying that the president is just taking a number that sounds big so that it'll look like he's doing something about federal spending. We humans have a problem with big numbers. We hear that the president is taking $100 million out of a $3.5 trillion budget, but what we understand is the president is taking a big pile of money out of a bigger pile of money. We don't get the concept of scale very well when we're dealing with that kind of money. And I think we can understand better. Let's stack 5 pennies together.
His room is messy. He needs to clean up.
This is the federal budget.
I was talking over him.
Let's
Sorry.
stack 5 pennies together and say that this represents $2 billion. This is the federal budget. About $100 in pennies. Well, just a little under 90 after I take out the leafy pennies and the ones from my birth year and the pennies with the Queen of England on them. I think it's a Canadian conspiracy to ruin our monetary system. To the left of the white line is mandatory spending. Before we can fix a single road or build a bridge or pay a soldier, we have to spend this money. It's mainly...
So mandatory spending is spending that is written into law. People will receive this money, okay? This is stuff that, that we call these... why can I think of them? If you qualify for them, you get them entitlements, right? We call these entitlements. If you qualify for these, you are entitled to get them, right? So Congress has to give money to set aside money for these programs because people have to get them, right? It's required by law that they'll get them.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. President Obama couldn't cut spending from there even if he wanted to. To the right of the white line is the only part of the budget he can reduce. To the left of the blue line is money we have. To the right of the blue line is money we don't have, so we have to borrow it.
So, again, to the left of the blue line, this is the money that we've taken in taxes. To the right, this is money that we have to borrow. This is the deficit, right, which is going to add on to our country's debt.
We'd obviously like to reduce the number of pennies on the right side of the blue line if we can. Here's what President Obama says he's going to do. We'll just grab that penny there. Then we take 3/4 of our penny, and we put it back on the budget. And the president's team is going to take 90 days to find some way to take this out of that. And suddenly, $100 million doesn't seem as big to me as when he said it in the press conference.
Yeah, we have a problem with big numbers, don't we? Right? Let's continue on here. But this is an example. This video does a great example. It shows two things. A, big numbers are really hard to understand. B, it also demonstrates this idea of mandatory spending, right? Stuff we have to spend money on, and discretionary spending, stuff that is up for debate, right? Whenever Congress can't agree on what the budget's going to be, a lot of the times it's this here. And furthermore, it also demonstrates, hey, whatever we don't have money for, we have to borrow, right? In the form of, selling bonds, or it could also be, we don't only have this much taxes, right? So we have to borrow this much. Very good video. Let's go on, right? This is one of my favorite examples to look at for how big numbers we just can't get. So 1 million seconds, how long would that be? Well, what do you think about 1 billion seconds? Trillion? Okay, I don't know. 1 million seconds has to be days. 1 billion seconds, that's probably what? Days times 1,000, that'd be years. Trillion seconds, I don't know. Dang, right? Dang. It's a long time, right? It's crazy just how, the things keep multiplying and getting bigger and bigger, okay? So when we hear trillion, a million, and billion, a million on its own is huge, right? But a billion and a trillion, dang. I think one of the coolest people I've seen to I'm gonna steal this from Reckful. He had a great example. I'm just gonna go to this real quick as I pull up my Google Docs. So I'll make a document real quick doing what he did. Or actually, do I have Notepad? Because he did his in Notepad, so it's only appropriate that I do mine in Notepad. Okay. So let's go back to the classroom here. Okay. So let's see if you can see this. So $100,000, right? See it up in the left hand side here. That's like a really good salary for a year. Okay, this is what he says. Really good salary for a year. You'd be happy if you made that in a year. You'd probably be content. Wouldn't have to worry about many things. Okay, so we need to make this $1 million. So we need, if we take 5 of these, I also want to include that. So that's 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, 600, 700, 800, 900,000, $1 million. Right, so that's $1 million. Let's take this here. So we have $1 million, yeah. So that's 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, 8 million, 9 million, 10 million. So there's 10 million, okay. We're still in the millions here. So that's 10 million. Let's go to 20 million, 30, whoopsies. No. No. What has happened? There we go. I don't know where I was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can't believe I did this. I messed up. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, 50 million, 60 million, 70 million, 80 million, 90 million, 100 million. So let's take all this. So again, this is 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, 400 million, 500 million, 600 million, 700 million, 800 million, 900 million, 1 billion. This is $1 billion. I would have to take this whole thing and copy and paste it 1,000 times to get $1 trillion. Okay, $1 trillion is huge. Okay, we oftentimes lose sight of just how big these numbers are. Okay. This video just shows how quickly presidents have spent money. And the point is, Obama complains about, Bush for spending a lot of money. And then Obama runs super high deficits as well. Spoiler alert, Trump complained about the deficits that Obama ran. And Trump has run way bigger deficits since Obama was in office. Even before the pandemic, they were almost twice as high. With COVID, oh my gosh, they're ridiculous, right? So, why do politicians run deficits? Why do congressmen vote for bills that are going to end up leading to deficits? Why do presidents agree to be spending this money? Because, it pushes the costs to the future. We get the benefits immediately. The costs, not my problem. I'm going to be in office, right? Presidents are only in office for 4 to 8 years. So, whatever. I'll be out of office by then. Won't matter, okay? They're transferred into the future, right? Screw it. Let my grandkids pay for it, right? It'll be another politician's problem by then, right? This is just another great job of showing just how big the government is. How big the government debt is. I recommend watching it. You can go to the PDFs that are on the Canvas page and click on the video, and you'll be able to watch it. So let's take a look-see at the U.S. debt clock. Okay, this is one of my favorite websites. So you can see the U.S. national debt is right at $27 trillion. Okay, I also want you to see that our deficit. Where's our deficit for this year? It always takes me time to find it. Okay, so our deficit this year is we're spending $3.1 trillion. Okay, 3.1 trillion on the federal level. Okay, but we're only getting in taxes 3 trillion, right? So we're spending more than we get every year, right? So it leads us to this, sorry, hold on. Where's our spending? Here we are. We're spending 6 trillion, right? But we're getting 3 trillion. So this leads to our deficit. We have to borrow $3 trillion a year right now, okay? That is crazy. But that said, though, I mean, our GDP is 19 trillion, right? Our national debt is 27 trillion, yeah? So this is, getting more worrying every year. Normally when it was, when it was only a couple trillion above our GDP, it wasn't too worrying. Because, in the same way that, I have money for my house is worth, $100,000. And, me and my wife, we don't make, like around 90 or so. So, we are in debt more than we earn in a year, but that's okay, right? Because we know we'll be able to pay it off. So we have to just be able to service the debt in the same way the United States only has to be able to service the debt. However, I mean, there keeps growing to be a larger disparity between these two every year, right? And especially with COVID, we saw how, we just went from it was like 23 trillion to this number here super quickly. And the deficit under Trump even rose way higher, right? We were getting an extra $1 trillion in a deficit every year. But one thing that should scare you, or you should focus on, right? This number up here, right? It's fine so long. It's fine so long as we can pay off, the interest on the debt. We just have to be able to service it, right? In the same way that I don't have to be able to pay off my whole house, I just have to be able to make my mortgage payments. But this number is going to continue to get larger, not only because politicians will want to run larger deficits, but we have promised money to individuals, okay? So one thing that we need to look at is this number here. This is the U.S. unfunded liabilities, okay? And this stands at $154 trillion. Now, this is money that we don't owe yet, but as our population ages and qualifies for things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, as more and more people start getting on those programs, this number is going to start coming from being a liability to something that we actually owe, right? So because of this number here growing larger and larger, as we promise more people more and more money in forms of services that we have to provide them, then this number up here is going to grow larger. So what happens when this number grows so large that we can't service the debt anymore? Well, it means that there's only one of two things that we can do, right? It means that our the bonds that the United States gives out are going to lose value, which we'll come to that video here in a second, which could cause there to be, I'm going to go to this here, which could cause there to be repercussions in the credit market, which means people have to pay higher interest rates and people are not lending to the U.S. government as much. It could also lead to another financial crisis, right? It could lead to, if instead of, just defaulting on the debt, the government could also just print money to pay for the debt, right? Which that would lead to a lot of inflation, right? In the future, whenever we decide that, okay, man, we need to really pay off this debt, it could lead to higher taxes. And we know that taxes decrease the incentive to produce, and that would then lead to less production and a reduction in GDP if we are going to be able to service that debt, okay? So it's certainly not a good thing if it doesn't get under control, yeah? So what can we do about it? What can we do about it? Well, the author of Common Sense Economics recommends these three things. There could be a requirement for the federal government to have a balanced budget. Okay, Indiana, for example, in order for the budget to get passed, it has to be a balanced budget, meaning that the spending has to be equal to the revenue, right? And as we get into the fourth part of this book, I mean that's what everybody will recommend for an individual, right? Have a balanced budget, right? Don't spend more every month than you bring in every month. Okay, so hey, government should do the same thing. If the next suggestion the author has is to require a supermajority, be it 2/3 or 4/5 in both houses of Congress, both the Senate and the House, in order to increase how much we can be in debt, right? So make it harder for us to get into more debt. And then the last suggestion is to require that Congress only spend an amount equal to last year's tax revenue, right? The idea being that, okay, you can only spend as much as you brought in, right? This idea of leading to a more balanced budget. Okay, so let's watch this video here, and then we'll go on to one last thing.
What can I do for you today?
I would like to raise my debt limit.
Excuse me?
My debt limit, I'd like to raise it.
Because the last time I checked, Mr. Smith, you were in serious debt.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Figure we should raise that limit.
Yeah, it says here you're $140,270 in debt.
Right. So I figured we should raise that limit to about 170,000. I just bought a 60-inch flat screen. Have you ever been to Australia?
No.
Leaving tomorrow, mate. You should check it out. Great parasailing.
Do you have some new income that I don't know about?
No, still making about 21 grand a year.
Okay. And are you still spending $38,000 a year?
That's what it says.
So you're adding $17,000 a year in debt.
Wow, is that what it comes out to? Debt limit going up. Ding.
Have you made any cuts in your expenses?
Oh, of course, yes. My wife and I cut $380 out of our annual budget. It's $380. Brutal.
Okay. So you're adding. Okay. So you're adding $17,000 a year to your $140,000 in debt, and you cut $380.
Well, you say it like that, it makes it not sound like a lot.
Hey, maybe you should think about generating some new income. Maybe a new job. Maybe ask for that raise.
Oh, asking for that raise, I'm not comfortable. That's an awkward conversation. I've always been able to raise my debt limit.
Yeah, well, this is a little different.
Well, how?
We're in the middle of a recession, and your credit rating will plummet if you continue to go along this path.
I almost had it.
You don't see how bad this is, do you?
I cut my budget by $380. Are you kidding?
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. We can't help you.
Just a little.
I'm very sorry.
My wife is going to lose it.
Been there.
I mean, $380 was bad enough. I mean, this is going to end our marriage. We stopped talking to each other for a month. The baby was totally freaked out.
Wait. You have kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm there.
All right. Aren't kids a blessing? I mean, she's got plenty of time to deal with all this, right?
Absolutely.
Are we all set?
You're all set.
All right. Let's go, kiddo. We got to meet Mommy at the car store. Here you go. I think this is yours.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Of course, all these numbers are being pulled from, they're going to... Yeah. All those numbers are being really mirrored up to the federal budget deficit. And I want to say, the 2008-2009 era. Pretty funny video. All right. So, why does this happen? Well, it's a function of democracy, right? It's not an intended feature, but it's something that will always happen because of unrestrained democracy. It will inevitably lead to there being deficits due to there being spending, because politicians are just reacting to the incentives that are in front of them, right? It's always going to lead to, as we talked about in previous sections, funds being taken away from those that are disorganized. So it'll cost everybody something, right? But that money is then transferred to people that are organized interest groups. And when voters are voting on what they want to do, when they're voting for the politicians that do these things, right? I mean, they're largely going to be uninformed because the cost of becoming informed is so high relative to the benefits. So guys, that's all I have. Thank you for watching the lecture, and I will see you next time.